As a quick reminder, who are cavemen at the beginning? Of our characters, which one was the least intelligent? All right, why do you say Trevor was the least? Uses vocab he doesn't know. And why did you say oogie or boogie? Someone said oogie or boogie.
Whichever one the middle one.
Okay, so you think he's the least. This is the one that's out in the real world. He's the one that got beat up. Least because he's a follower. Okay? Who's Mike?
Is the old Mike is the
Oh,
oldest guy.
hold on. Atlas what? Yeah. You're welcome. Who's Mike?
The old man outside the cave.
Mike's an old man. All right. Characteristics of Mike with the way they describe him.
Wise.
Wise. Okay. That's the key part there with Mike, is that it literally describes him as wise, and you need to know that for what happens later. What's the big conflict that happened in chapters 1 through 3?
Boogie gets kicked out.
Boogie gets kicked out of his home because what?
He had an idea.
He turned to knowledge. He asked for one thing that they swore they wouldn't do, right? Which was go into the light, okay, which is knowledge. All right. So picking up on chapter 4. Now, I did not erase the things from the previous class because it saves time with writing. But I guess I probably should. Okay. It started around 45. What did we talk about yesterday? Every time you see a what? Time is symbolic. A number. Okay? So you could look this up one of two ways. Okay? You can look up 45, or you can look up an hour and then do some thinking from there and figure out, 45 minutes is 3/4 of an hour and so forth. Okay? We looked it up in the other class, and when you look up the symbolism of 45 minutes, it specifically says that 45 minutes symbolizes hidden warrior. So add that to your list. So 45 minutes is hidden warrior. 45 minutes into the Neolithic period. Neolithic is one of our vocabulary words. What does it mean? It's the last, and I'm glad that you got the last phase, because that's important, and it was kind of left off earlier. It's the last phase of the Stone Age. Okay? I'll give you a chance to write that down. Why is it significant that in chapter 4, which if you'll notice over here, 4 symbolizes life. Okay. Why is it significant that in chapter 4, it starts out with the last phase of the Stone Age? Cavemen could be coming outside.
I was like, well, maybe it can be a new life for him since the old one ended.
A new life for him. The old one ended. Anyone in the back? Anyone? Anyone on computer?
I was gonna say maybe he can live life now, and he can explore and figure out more since he didn't really know much of the Stone Age.
Okay. So if the Stone Age symbolizes lack of knowledge, he's not quite there yet. He doesn't have all the knowledge he needs to fully live, but he can start to live his life. Okay? Good. Ooh, I like that. He can start seeing the meaning of life. But the key part there is start, right? And all of you guys had that with your answer is start. He's beginning. And that's the key. And that's why I break it up with 1 through 3 and 4 through 6. Is because 4 is where Boogie's life begins. Okay? All right. Tone. I noticed that this was an issue on the quiz a little bit for chapters 1 through 3. Kids are messing up the difference between tone and mood. Okay. Tone, that's how the author feels. Okay. We talked a little bit yesterday, or last class, about how the author was irritated, right? And he kept using sarcasm. Okay. The mood, though, is how you feel. And it was kind of funny in first period. I asked them, I said, so how do you feel when Boogie was, being beat up? And they looked at me and they said, I didn't feel anything. Okay, well, and it's possible that that's why you're struggling with the questions, is because it asks for the mood or the tone, and you're like, well, I didn't feel anything. Okay? In which case, it's okay, but just ask yourself, how did the author want me to feel? Okay? So instead of how did I feel, and then choose, and unfortunately one of the answers actually was nothing. So don't choose nothing unless that's what the author wanted you to feel. Okay? So let's look at the mood of chapters 1 through 3. What did the author want you to feel in the first 3 chapters?
Curious.
He did kind of want you to be curious. That's a good answer. He wanted you to be curious about why on earth were these people eating rocks and dead bugs. Okay, that's a good answer. I like that one. I haven't had that one before. Okay, what else?
Upset, because you don't like seeing people go through a hard time,
Absolutely. You're going through this hard time. You should feel upset about that. Good. Anything else? Anyone online? Okay. Now look at the beginning of chapter 4. Your ancestors all lived together in a large tribe, right here in these fields. Their numbers grew every year. These were happy times. These were happy times. Combine that with the symbolism of 45, that is the last phase of the Stone Age. What's the mood the author is setting up for chapters 4 through 6? Mood words are always feelings. So, happy. Why are you saying sad? I'm not sure why you're saying sad. I'm confused there.
Oh, no, because that world, that life doesn't exist anymore.
So are you thinking more like of the nostalgic?
Oh, no, it's like maybe that old man feels upset about it because it's not happening anymore.
Okay, I see what you've done. Okay, when we look at, you're looking at a specific character, in which case you're right. Mike is definitely sad that these things happened, okay? But when you're looking at overall mood, you're not looking at like what one particular character thinks, and that's actually a good thing because this might be why other people were missing it in the other class and I didn't realize what the problem was. You want to look at you. What does the author want you to feel based on everything that you see? So yes, Mike is feeling sad, but you are feeling what?
Happy.
Okay, so you're with the happy over here. Okay, so there's a contrast, isn't there? Okay, a definite contrast between chapters 1 through 3 and 4 through 6.
David says hope.
Hope. I like that answer. Hope. He's definitely hopeful. There's in all honesty, it's one question on the ACT, but I'm still going to teach it, and I always teach it with this unit because it's the easiest place to teach it. But there's one question on the ACT that drives me insane. The standard actually says you have to explain how the format or the structure of a piece of literature impacts the overall piece of work. That's what the actual standard says. Okay? On the ACT, though, it's always nonfiction or a short excerpt from a short story. And so you have to figure out how this paragraph influences the overall passage. It is a very difficult question. I'm going to teach it with this unit. Okay? Why chapters? Okay? Why does the author not make, it's not a long story. Okay? Why not just make this a long short story that's like 3 pages long? Okay? Why does he separate this into chapters? What effect does setting this up into chapters have on the story? Yes. Each chapter is the beginning of a new phase, isn't it? And so when you come across those questions on your practice ACTs and then on the real ACT, you need to look for characterization or conflict, because that's typically what it has to do with. Okay? It's either showing a conflict or it's showing something with characterization. Okay? In this case, it is the characterization of Boogie and how he's changing. Each chapter is a separate phase of what he's learning. Okay? Very good. But as the numbers increased, these fields could no longer support the people. Food became scarce, and the people went hungry. They realized they would have to branch out if they were to survive. What is the main conflict that started everything that's happened?
Food became scarce. And people went hungry.
Okay. And because they went hungry, they were fighting to what?
For food.
Survive. Good. This is like the 3rd time we have seen this word. Anytime you see a word in there multiple times, you need to make note of it and then think of theme. Okay? We have the beginnings of another theme here. Now we know that a theme is not one word. It is a complete sentence. So we don't know yet what the theme is with survival. To get the theme, we have to ask ourselves, as we're reading, what is the author telling me about survival? When you can answer that, that's when you have your theme. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, they realized they would have to branch out if they were to survive. All right. The people were desperate, so they came together for a meeting before the elders. The wise elders told them, "Go and build tall towers that will allow you to see as much of the surrounding lands as possible. When we learn more about the lands around us, then we shall know what we should do." So that's what the people did. Let's look at the elders. When I say elders to you, what are some of their characteristics? What else? Does anybody picture this old man with a long beard, maybe a soft voice? Okay, that actually comes from Lord of the Rings, Gandalf. Being kind of wise, that elder who's always there, he's humble. Yes. Okay. Anyone online have anything to add about characteristics of an elder? Good. So we have wise, old, clever, humble, soft-spoken, caring, and then you added gentle, and sometimes mad because they want you to do what they say, and then if you don't, they get irritated. Okay? And then disciplined. You could tie grumpy to this one if you wanted to. Okay. The wise elders told them, "Go build tall towers that will allow you to see as much of the surrounding land as possible. When we learn more about the lands around us, then we shall know what we must do." So that's what people did. Mike paused for a deep breath. He continued. After many, many days, the people returned to the elders. Have you built the towers? The elders asked. Yes, we have, the tribe replied. Have you seen the lands around us? The elder asked. Yes, we have, the tribe replied. Then what must we do to survive? So here's my question to you. In 2020, I mean, we've seen survival over and over again in this story. We've talked about it. And so my question to you, is that what drives every person in everything we do today? Is just a matter of survival? We must build collecting baskets and storehouses for food and weaving looms to make tents, announced one group. Only then will we be able to survive in the surrounding lands. But then another group spoke up. No, we must build spears, traps, and tools for the hunt. Only then will we be able to survive in the surrounding lands. So again, you have the survival word coming in. So we're developing our theme. Can we answer part of our question yet? What the author is saying about survival? Different views of what it takes to survive. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that the theme? It's a full sentence. Is that a theme?
Yes.
No. I was hoping someone would say yes. It's actually not. Because a theme is a lesson, right? So that's still the first half. What lesson can you learn about your life to be a better person from that one sentence? That's the theme. So if everybody has different views of what it takes to survive, what can you learn about that? What have you learned about survival?
Embark on doing you trust your gut.
Okay. And everybody's theme will be slightly different because it's personal. Okay. That's the true theme. So watch out for those questions on my quizzes and the ACT. Okay? It's got to be a full sentence, and it has to be the lesson. So when you're looking at your answer choices, ask yourself, is this what teaches me a lesson? That's the correct answer. Okay? But then another group, group one, I've already read this. What did group one believe was important?
Basically, have to do baskets.
Okay. And what did group two believe was important?
Spears.
Food and spears. So you have, in my mind, I'm thinking of the early American Indians because this is the image that comes to my mind. Group one reminds me of the Indian maidens who would go out with their baskets and they would pick the berries and bring them home. And then group two reminds me of the warriors. You know, they would go out with the spears and they would aggressively attack for food. Okay? And there's no compromise there. Zoom in. I can. The first group responded, if we waste time building spears and traps and tools for the hunt, the tribe will surely die. The second group said, no. If we waste time building collecting baskets and storehouses and weaving looms, then the tribe will surely die. Now the elders were confused. Okay, one of the biggest problems with English 3 is literary devices. Okay? You guys know irony. You've learned that one already. I'm going to go ahead and give you the broad definition of it rather than the one for the specific types. So irony, as a reminder, is a contradiction. Okay. You expect one thing but get something else. One of the biggest problems that you have in English 3 are the additional terms that you get taught that you've never had before, like paradox, Now we've seen paradox. I talked about that in the previous chapters. But it also means contradiction. And antithesis, that also means contradiction. Okay? You're going to have 5 terms this year whose definition all means contradiction. And so you're like, oh my gosh, how am I supposed to figure out, is this irony or a paradox or an antithesis? That's what we're going to work on. Okay? But that's kind of why it's important to make sure you have a good grasp of the ones that you do already know, which is irony. So that when I add the other terms on there, you can start learning the difference between them. Okay? So irony, it's a contradiction. You really expected this something to happen, and you get something else. So when we look at our answer here, the elders were confused. How is that ironic? It's tied to our list that we wrote on the previous slide. You're absolutely correct. The elders were wise. They're the ones that have been driving this. They're supposed to be the ones in charge, but they're confused, and they're listening to the advice of the younger people. Okay? And so that's a contradiction there. That's why it's ironic. Me too, said Boogie, engrossed. His eyes were wide, and he sucked nervously on a rock. Who else sucked nervously on a rock?
His friends.
His friends. The author is making a comment here about a person's background. What do you think the author is saying about a person's background?
His background wasn't smart people.
It wasn't smart people, but Boogie's trying to get better, right? This is chapter 4. He's trying to learn. He's trying to grow. But what does he do when confronted with stress?
He goes back to his old ways.
He goes back to his old ways. As a society, do you agree with that? Do you agree in times of stress that we revert back to what we're comfortable with?
Yeah.
Let me read it to you again, and listen to the words that the author uses. If he's angry at them, you're going to have angry words. If he's sympathetic towards them, the tone is going to be sympathetic or almost caring, and you're going to have those type words. If he's happy for them, you're going to have happy words. So, me too, said Boogie, engrossed. His eyes were wide, and he sucked nervously on a rock. What happened next? The tone. How does the author feel about people who are trying to get better but don't quite make it? Okay, so he says engrossed, which means being absorbed. That's a positive image, isn't it? It's kind of like embraced. You're sitting there and you're looking, you're absorbed in it. Okay? So you can tell that the author is sympathetic towards Boogie here. The people got angry. That's what happened next. The first group said to the other, weapons are for killing. To build weapons is barbaric. Now, barbaric means savage. Why do you think he uses that word here?
To insult him.
To what?
To insult him.
To insult him. Okay. Why else would they use the word savage here?
Because cavemen are known to be savage.
You hit something and didn't realize what you've done. In about a paragraph or so, I want you to remember what you just said. Okay?
I think I did it too, because I feel like he said like they try to change things to come.
You are barbarians, the second group responded. To sit and weave baskets while our people die of hunger is cowardly. You are cowards. And so it went back and forth. Barbarians, cowards, tree-hugging dorks. Okay? And you did get the irony before we actually got there, which is great. They wanted to be these civilized people who are surviving, right? And instead, all they've done is fight so much that they have become uncivilized barbarians. Although Boogie didn't know exactly what a tree-hugging dork was, Mike's story evoked painful memories of his last moments in the cave. Evil and delusional were the words his friends had used. So then what happened? Boogie asked. Mike was quiet for a moment, gazing sadly into the distance. Finally, he spoke. The tribe split. The first group wove their baskets. The second group built their spears. Eventually, the people with the spears drove out their fellow tribesmen who scattered through the hills and hid. Now, here's the question. when they split, is that not a good thing? You've hit exactly what the author's saying is they could have helped each other, they could have compromised. Instead, by splitting apart, they've weakened themselves. We won't get to it until January, but our unit in January revolves around Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln's speech that sets up the whole unit is, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." And he's talking about how if we don't stand together and work together, that we're weak across the board. This author, that's exactly what he's saying here, isn't it? That by splitting, it doesn't matter what one tribe thinks and the other tribe thinks, both of them are now weak and have deteriorated. Okay, does that make sense? Can we answer our question yet about what the author's saying with survival? Anything on theme starting to become clear?
So,
And you see the difference between just the statement, working together to get the job done, is the first half. So if you work together to get the job done, what is going to happen? What did you learn? Well, I'll be happy. That's what I've learned. And that's what makes it a theme. Okay? Then those with spears began to argue among themselves. In the end, they turned on one another. It was horrible. So they really were barbarians and cowards. No, at least not at the beginning, but it's what they became. The labels they placed on each other became reality. Okay, I've put a star beside that. We're going to talk about it for a minute, but it's actually one of your writing prompts next week. Okay, so you're going to want to think about it. Maybe get some ideas from your class, from the discussion we're about to have. But it's what they became. The labels they placed on each other became reality. Think about that for just a minute. My first half of the question is, what does that mean? And then the last half of the question, because you're absolutely right, that's exactly what it means. Where do you see it today? Real world examples. That was an excellent discussion. Where did I leave off? It certainly was interesting, but Boogie was not quite sure he understood it. He decided he would have to think about it, which is what you guys are going to do between now and your writing assignment. Think about it. So where everybody now? Boogie asked. In caves. Everyone lives in caves, Mike said quietly. For a long time, Boogie and Mike just sat there, gazing towards the horizon of that vast, empty landscape. Chapter 5, in which the tale of two tribes is explored, nearly giving Boogie a migraine. Boogie's mind raced as he tried to grasp Mike's story of the two tribes. He thought back to his experience in his own cave. It somehow seemed relevant to all of this, but he wasn't sure how. He wished his pre-evolutionary neocortex was more evolved. Definition of neocortex was on your vocab list. I didn't erase it, so it's already on here. But it controls the high-functioning part of your brain. Okay? What is Boogie saying here? He wishes his pre-evolutionary neocortex were more involved. What was his wish, please?
He wishes he was smarter than he is right now.
Yes. He wishes that at the beginning he had been smarter than he was. Okay? Maybe then he could fully understand the meaning of Mike's story. Finally, Boogie asked, so why tribe disagree at beginning anyway? Why divide over spears and baskets? Boogie not understand. The old man's eyes sparkled. Ah, very good question, Boogie. Let's go back to the beginning. Why do you think they disagreed? Boogie mulled this over for a few minutes. Finally, he replied, not sure, but maybe it was like shadows on wall? Okay. All right, my question to you. What do you think Boogie means right there? Maybe was like shadows on wall. Very good. Let's just erase that. Boogie could understand that the seer of truth didn't quite understand. Boogie continued. Well, he said, choosing his words carefully, maybe everyone see wrong, like seeing shadows. We see wrong, so we act wrong. Do you agree with that? Do you think as a society we see the world wrong, so we act wrong?
Yes.
Very good, Boogie, said Mike. But perhaps it's not a matter of seeing wrong, but of seeing incompletely. This is his motive for writing the book. Okay? So you're going to see this again. And that's what happened with our ancestors. Follow me and I'll show you. Boogie and Mike walked several miles to the far east side of the field. There they came upon one of the old towers their forefathers had built so many years ago. It was weathered and ramshackled, but still standing. Go up and see, said Mike. Carefully, Boogie climbed the crumbling stone stairs that spiraled to the top of the tower. From the top of the tower, Boogie could see the eastern horizon. It was coarse, rocky land populated with buffalo, elk, and sheep. Boogie could see how, in a land this rich with wildlife, they could certainly need spears, traps, and tools for hunting. His brow furrowed, Boogie descended the tower and rejoined Mike. Follow me, Mike said again. They walked several more miles in the opposite direction. They came upon another crumbling tower, this one looking to the west. Boogie climbed the tower. From the top of the tower, Boogie could see the western horizon. Unlike the eastern landscape, this was lush land, covered with grapevines, corn stalks, and wild cotton bushes. Boogie could see how, in a land this rich with vegetation, you would certainly need baskets and storehouses and weaving looms. Now Boogie understood why the two tribes went to war. Two different towers, two different views. We only see in part, he whispered to himself. He stood there deep in thought for a long time. Tie this to your theme of survival. We only see in part. How does that have to do with what we've been talking about with survival?
It's because you get like a different point of perspective that is maybe less or greater than what the first part was.
Okay, good. Finally, Boogie emerged from the base of the tower. He seemed frustrated. It all seemed so silly, he said to Mike. Why divide? Why fight over different views? Why not just go in each other's towers so everyone understands why everyone sees different? And that's my question to you. Think of the world today. Every time you turn on the news, it's depressing, isn't it? It's always about conflict, okay? It doesn't matter what the conflict is. I'm sure there's one on there. Why do we as a society not just look at the other tower to get both perspectives? All right, let's get the end of the book. It does seem pretty simple, doesn't it? Answered Mike, but it seldom works that way. Instead, people divide and work against each other. Why do you think this happens? Boogie wasn't sure, but it did appear that people became awfully upset when asked about their beliefs or when somebody suggested there might be other ways to look at things. Soon came the labels like mad or barbarians or cowards, and after that came the bruising ashtrays and murderous spears. Boogie decided this was another important thing to think about. This will also be something you're going to be writing about next week, okay? It actually ties to the previous one that we just talked about. Suddenly, Boogie turned from Mike. Boogie, go back now, Boogie said. Where are you going? Asked Mike. Back to cave. Must tell others what I have seen. No more dividing, no more hiding in caves, no more eating cereal made of gravel. Must give others chance to climb more towers. Must all work together to see more truth. Then we can be great in number again. We can eat meat and drink wine and make shelter and populate all of this land. Be careful, Mike warned him. Remember how painful it was for a curious cave person like you to leave the cave. Imagine how much harder it will be for the others who are satisfied to stay there. Others not be satisfied when I tell them about great big world and show new way to see, Boogie said as he turned to leave. Others will want to learn more, see more. Boogie, wait, Mike called after Boogie, but Boogie was already gone. Uh-oh. So Boogie has he really changed, or is he still that naive character he was at the beginning? A little bit, but he still has that, everyone's going to want to change because I changed. That do-gooder attitude, he's changed in that part. But he hasn't really understood yet that people have to want to change. Okay? So let's see what happens to poor Boogie when he goes back to his cave. After walking many miles, Boogie approached the mouth of his old cave. From deep inside the cave, Boogie could hear the muffled voices of Oonga Boonga, Oogie, and Trevor, and the familiar crunching sounds as they snapped on dead locusts. It suddenly occurred to Boogie how gross this really was. Boogie's heart ached with sadness and fear. Would his friends turn violent as they had once before? Would they attack him for telling them about the shadows and the great world he had seen outside? Or would they be open to joining Boogie in exploring the things they all believed? Trembling, Boogie took a deep breath. If they don't want to learn, Boogie thought as he stepped into the cave, I will find others who will. After all, he thought, Mike said there were many, many others living in hundreds of caves. And then this is the picture that goes with it. And that's actually the end of the story. We don't know what happens when Boogie gets back in with the cavemen. We can hypothesize, okay? And as long as you prove your point, you're good to go, okay? All right. But really, there were millions.